At 5:30 a.m. in Lincoln Elementary School in Kansas City, the hallways were supposed to be empty. But in the boys' bathroom on the second floor, 82-year-old Ezekiel Thornberry was on his hands and knees, trembling violently as he tried to clean vomit off the floor with his bare hand. The mop had become too heavy for his arthritic fingers to grip properly, and he hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days to save money for his granddaughter's diabetes medication. Travis Kelce was arriving early for what was supposed to be a routine school visit when he heard a low, pained moan echoing from the bathroom. Something in that sound made his blood run cold. It wasn't the cry of a child who had scraped their knee. It was the sound of someone in true agony. "Hello? Is someone in there?" Travis called out, pushing open the bathroom door. What he found would haunt him forever. Ezekiel was collapsed on the filthy tile floor, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, his entire body shaking as he struggled to breathe. His janitor's uniform was soaked with sweat and worse things, and his eyes held the hollow look of a man who had been pushed far beyond his breaking point. "Oh my God! Sir, what happened?" Travis rushed to kneel beside the old man, his heart pounding as he pulled out his phone to call 911. But Ezekiel's weathered hand shot out with surprising strength, grabbing Travis's wrist. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't call anyone. Don't tell Director Serafina Coldwell. If I miss another day of work, she'll fire me. And if she fires me, my granddaughter Temperance will die without her medicine." Travis stared at the old man in shock. Here was someone literally collapsing from exhaustion and malnutrition, begging not to get medical help because he was terrified of losing a job that was clearly killing him. "Sir, you need to get to a hospital right now. Your job isn't worth your life." Ezekiel's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. Temperance has diabetes. Without her insulin, she'll be dead in a week. This job is the only thing keeping her alive." Travis helped Ezekiel to his feet, his mind racing as he processed what he was witnessing. This wasn't just an elderly employee having a bad day. This was systematic exploitations, literally killing someone. "How much do they pay you?" Travis asked gently, supporting Ezekiel's weight as they walked slowly toward a chair in the hallway. $800 a month, Ezekiel replied, wiping blood from his mouth with a shaking hand. "I know it's not much, but I'm grateful to have work at my age. Most places won't hire someone who's 82. Travis felt his stomach drop. $800 a month for what appeared to be full-time janitorial work was criminal. "How many hours do you work per week?" "About 50 to 60 hours, sometimes more when they need extra cleaning done." Ezekiel's voice carried no anger, only resignation. "Director Coldwell says I should be thankful they're willing to employ me when most companies would have forced me to retire years ago." The numbers were staggering. Travis quickly calculated in his head. Ezekiel was earning roughly $3.50 per hour, far below minimum wage for backbreaking physical labor that would challenge someone half his age. "What about your granddaughter's medication? How much does that cost?" Ezekiel's face crumpled with pain that had nothing to do with his physical condition. $400 a month, just for the insulin. Then there's the test strips, the doctor visits when I can afford them. Some months I have to choose between her medicine and food for both of us. Usually, I choose her medicine." Travis had heard enough. Without another word, he pulled out his phone and called his assistant. "I need you to contact the best pharmacy in Kansas City and set up an account for someone's diabetes medication. Whatever it costs, whatever they need, just handle it immediately." He looked at Ezekiel, who was staring at him in disbelief. "What's your granddaughter's full name and what pharmacy do you use?" "Temperance Bramblewood, and we use the CVS on Oak Street. But sir, I can't accept charity. I've always worked for everything I've had." "This isn't charity," Travis said firmly. "This is basic human decency. No one should have to choose between their health and their family's medication." Within an hour, Travis had not only arranged for Temperance's medication to be fully covered, but he had also demanded a meeting with Director Serafina Coldwell. What he found when he walked into her office was even more disturbing than he had anticipated. Serafina Coldwell was a woman in her mid-40s with perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, and the cold demeanor of someone who viewed human beings as nothing more than line items on a budget. Her office was lavishly decorated with awards and certificates, and she greeted Travis with the kind of fake smile reserved for celebrities who might bring positive publicity to the school. "Mr. Kelce, What an honor to have you visit our little school. I trust you've been impressed with our facility and our dedicated staff. I've been impressed, all right, Travis said, his voice carrying an edge that made Serafina's smile falter slightly. I'm impressed that you're paying an 82-year-old man less than $4 an hour to do work that would be challenging for someone a quarter his age. I'm impressed that you're exploiting someone's desperation to save money on your budget. Serafina's expression shifted from fake warmth to cold defensiveness in an instant. I'm not sure what Mr. Thornberry has told you, but he's a part-time employee who works by choice. We provide him with valuable employment when most places wouldn't hire someone his age. Part-time? Travis laughed bitterly. He's working 60 hours a week for $800 a month. That's not part-time, that's slave labor. Mr. Kelce, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Ezekiel accepts his compensation because it meets his need. This is simply market economic, supply and demand. He supplies the labor. We pay what the market will bear. The casual cruelty in her words hit Travis like a physical blow. This woman was talking about human exploitation as if it were a business strategy. The market will bear whatever you think you can get away with because you're preying on someone who's desperate. I prefer to think of it as providing opportunities for senior citizens who want to remain productive members of society. Serafina replied with a shrug. Ezekiel has never complained about his wages because he's terrified you'll fire him and his granddaughter will die. Travis's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. That's not consent, that's coercion. Serafina leaned back in her chair, her expression hardening. Mr. Kelce, I appreciate your concern, but this is really an internal personnel matter. Perhaps we could discuss your original reason for visiting our school instead. Travis realized he was dealing with someone who felt no shame about what she was doing, but he wasn't giving up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give Ezekiel a raise to at least minimum wage. You're going to reduce his hours to a humane level, and you're going to treat him with the dignity he deserves. And if I don't, then I'll make sure every parent in this district knows exactly how you treat the people who keep their children's school clean and safe. For the first time since the conversation began, Serafina looked genuinely concerned. Bad publicity could affect enrollment, which affected funding. After a long pause, she nodded curtly. I suppose we could approve a temporary bonus of $500 for Mr. Thornberry's dedicated service. It wasn't nearly enough, but it was a start. Travis left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic that he had made a difference. For 2 days, it seemed like the situation had improved. Ezekiel appeared stronger, Temperance's medication was taken care of, and the old man seemed to have a bit more spring in his step. But Travis was about to discover that Serafina Coldwell's cruelty ran much deeper than simple wage theft. On his third visit to check on Ezekiel, Travis found the old man in tears, scrubbing the same section of hallway over and over again with obsessive intensity. When Travis approached, Ezekiel looked up with eyes filled with anguish. I can't do it anymore, Mr. Kelce. I thought I could. I can't. Can't do what, Ezekiel? Mr. Grimwald, the supervisor, he came to see me yesterday. He said that if I don't work harder, if I don't pick up the slack for the other janitors, then innocent children are going to suffer in a dirty, unsafe environment. He said their parents trust me to keep them safe, and if I fail them, it will be my fault when kids get sick. Travis felt his blood begin to boil. Ezekiel, how many janitors are supposed to be working in this school? 4 full-time positions, but it's just me now. Mr. Grimwald said the budget is tight, and if I can't handle the work of 4 people, they'll have to cut the janitorial program entirely. All those children depending on me to keep their school clean and healthy. The psychological manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. They weren't just exploiting Ezekiel's financial desperation. They were weaponizing his caring nature against him, making him feel personally responsible for the well-being of hundreds of children. Ezekiel, you're one person. It's physically impossible for you to do the work of 4 people. But I have to try, the old man whispered. These children deserve better than a dirty school. If I work 14 hours a day, if I skip lunch breaks, maybe I can keep up. Travis realized that his small victory had made things worse. By forcing them to pay Ezekiel slightly more, he had inadvertently given them justification to demand impossibly more work. They were using Ezekiel's own compassion to torture him into working himself to death. Over the next week, Travis watched in horror as Ezekiel tried to live up to the impossible demands placed on him. The old man arrived at the school at 4:30 a.m. and didn't leave until after 7 p.m., moving through the hallways like a ghost, cleaning frantically and muttering to himself about protecting the children. Octavia Pinehurst, the school nurse, began to notice the change in Ezekiel's behavior. "He seems different lately," she mentioned to Travis during one of his visits. "More determined, I suppose. He keeps talking about how he can't let the children down, how their safety depends on him doing his job perfectly. Has anyone told him he doesn't have to clean the entire school by himself?" Octavia looked confused. "I assumed he knew there were supposed to be other janitors, but now that you mention, I haven't seen anyone else cleaning in weeks." Travis sought out Thaddeus Grimwald, finding him in his office reviewing spreadsheets with the satisfied expression of someone who had just solved a particularly challenging math problem. Thaddeus was a thin, sharp-featured man with cold eyes and the demeanor of someone who enjoyed having power over others. "Mr. Grimwald, I understand you've been telling Ezekiel that he's responsible for doing the work of 4 people. Thaddeus looked up with a slight smile. "Mr. Thornberry is a dedicated employee who takes pride in his work. I simply reminded him of how important his role in maintaining a safe learning environment for our students. By telling him that children will get sick if he doesn't kill himself working, I told him the truth, that cleanliness is essential for student health and that the school is depending on him to maintain our standard. If that motivates him to excellence, I see that as good management." Travis felt like he was talking to a sociopath. "You're manipulating a desperate old man into working himself to death. I'm maximizing our human resources efficiency. Ezekiel wants to feel valuable and needed. I'm giving him that opportunity." For a moment, Travis was speechless, a casual inhumanity response. These people had turned psychological torture into a management philosophy. But Ezekiel, fueled by his terror of letting the children down, seemed to find reserves of strength that surprised everyone. For one miraculous day, he managed to clean the entire school, spotless perfection. He worked from dawn to dusk without break, but he did it. When the last classroom was finished, he collapsed in a chair in the main hallway, exhausted but triumphant. "I did it," he whispered to himself, tears of relief streaming down his face. "The children will be..." Octavia found him there an hour later, still sitting in the same chair, staring at his hands with the expression of quiet pride. "Ezekiel, you look pleased with yourself today." "I kept up," he said softly. "For one day, I kept up with all the work. The children have a clean, safe school." For that brief moment, Ezekiel felt like the hero of his own story. He had faced an impossible challenge and somehow overcome it. The children would come to school the next morning to find spotless hallways, gleaming bathrooms, and immaculate classrooms, all because he had refused to give up. But the human body can only be pushed so far. The next morning, 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez was walking to her second-grade classroom when she saw Mr. Ezekiel lying motionless in the middle of the hallway. At first, she thought he was sleeping, but when she got closer, she could see that his face was gray and his breathing was labored and shallow. "Mr. Ezekiel," she said quietly, "are you okay?" When he didn't respond, Emma ran screaming for her teacher. Within minutes, the hallway was filled with panicked adults and traumatized children as paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Ezekiel's failing heart. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt like the longest 20 minutes of Travis's life. He had arrived at the school just as the paramedics were loading Ezekiel into the ambulance, and the sight of the old man's unconscious form hooked up to machines was almost more than he could bear. At the hospital, Dr. Magnolia Westbrook delivered news that was even worse than Travis had expected. "Mr. Thornberry has suffered a massive heart attack, but that's not even our biggest concern right now. He has 3 broken ribs that appear to have been healing incorrectly for weeks, severe malnutrition, and his body is showing signs of extreme physical exhaustion." "How long has he been working this condition?" "I don't know," Travis admitted. "I only found out about his situation a week ago." Dr. Westbrook shook her head in disbelief. "Mr. Kelce, this man's body is shutting down from overwork and undernourished. The broken ribs suggest he's been lifting and carrying things far beyond his physical capacity. The malnutrition indicates he's been skipping meals regularly for an extended period. This didn't happen overnight. As Dr. Westbrook continued her examination, she made discoveries that painted an even more horrifying picture. There's extensive muscle damage in his back and shoulders, consistent with repetitive heavy lifting. His hands show signs of chemical burns from cleaning product. And based on his blood work, I'd say he's been functioning on maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep per night for months. Travis felt sick. Will he be okay? Physically, we can treat the immediate symptoms, but the psychological trauma may be harder to address. When he briefly regained consciousness, he kept apologizing and saying he had failed the children. He seems to genuinely believe that his collapse is somehow a moral failing on his part. While Ezekiel was in intensive care, Dr. Westbrook made a discovery that would change everything. During his intake process, she noticed that his insurance information listed emergency contact at 2 other schools in the district. When she called to update them on his condition, she learned something that made her blood run cold. "Mr. Kelce, I think you need to hear this. I just spoke with administrators at Jefferson Elementary and Washington Middle School. They both have elderly janitorial staff in similar situations. According to what I've learned, there are at least 12 schools in this district that have replaced their full-time janitorial crews with single elderly workers who are paid below minimum wage and expected to maintain entire buildings by themselves." Travis stared at her in shock. "You're saying this is happening to other people? At least 30 people that I know of, probably more. And based on the medical records I've been able to access, 3 elderly janitors in this district have died in the past 2 years from what were listed as heart attack, stroke. But given what I'm seeing with Mr. Thornberry, I suspect those deaths were actually the result of extreme physical exhaustion and workplace abuse." The scope of the horror was beginning to dawn on Travis. This wasn't just about Ezekiel. It was a systematic campaign of exploitation that was literally killing. And somewhere in the city, there were other elderly people working themselves to death, convinced that they were heroes for enduring abuse. When Ezekiel finally woke up in the ICU 3 days later, the first words out of his mouth were not about his pain or his condition. "Mr. Kelce," he whispered, his voice barely audible through the oxygen mask. "I'm so sorry I failed. Who's going to clean the school while I'm here? Who's going to protect the children?" Travis had to leave the room before Ezekiel could see him cry. Later that evening, as Travis sat in the hospital waiting room, he received a call that would push him over the edge. It was Temperance Bramblewood, Ezekiel's granddaughter, calling from their tiny apartment. "Mr. Kelce, is Grandpa going to be okay? The people from the school called and said he might not be able to work anymore. They said if he can't come back soon, they'll have to find someone else. What are we going to do?" The cruelty was breathtaking. Ezekiel was fighting for his life in intensive care, and the school was already threatening to replace him. They weren't even waiting to see if he would survive. Travis made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to just help Ezekiel anymore. He was going to destroy the entire system that had created this nightmare. Travis didn't return to Lincoln Elementary as a concerned visitor. He returned as an investigator on a mission to expose the truth. Armed with a hidden recording device and a determination to document every detail of the exploitation he had discovered, he requested another meeting with Director Serafina Coldwell. This time, Serafina's fake warmth was completely absent. "Mr. Kelce, I'm very busy today. What can I do for you?" "I want to understand how your staffing model works," Travis said, keeping his voice neutral. "Specifically, how you manage to run a school this size with such a small janitorial staff." Serafina's eyes narrowed slightly. "Our staffing decisions are based on budgetary constraints and efficiency requirements. We've found that motivated individual contractors can often accomplish more than larger teams." "Individual contractors? Is that what you call employees like Ezekiel?" Mr. Thornberry is an independent contractor who chooses his own hours and work method. The arrangement benefits both parties. Travis pulled out his phone and showed her the recording app. "I'm going to record our conversation now. I want to make sure I understand your position clearly." For the first time, Serafina looked genuinely nervous. "I don't think recording is necessary for an informal conversation. This isn't informal anymore. This is me giving you an opportunity to explain why an 82-year-old man nearly died trying to do work that should be handled by 4 people. Serafina was quiet for a long moment, clearly calculating her options. Finally, she seemed to decide that honesty might be her best defense. "Mr. Kelce, you seem to think there's something sinister happening here. The truth is much simpler. This is good business. Good business? We identified a demographic of workers who are highly motivated, grateful for employment, and willing to work for competitive wages. Senior citizens who need supplemental income but can't find traditional employment elsewhere. We provide them with opportunities while managing our operational costs effectively. Travis felt his hands clench into fists. You mean you identified desperate people you could exploit? I mean, we created a mutually beneficial arrangement. These individuals get employment they wouldn't find elsewhere, and we get dedicated workers who take pride in their jobs. It's a win-win situation. A win-win situation that put a man in the ICU. Serafina's mask finally slipped completely. Mr. Thornberry's health issues are unfortunate, but they're not the school's responsibility. He's an adult who made his own choices about how much work to take on. After you told him children would suffer if he didn't work himself to death, I told him the truth about the importance of his role. If that motivated him to excellence, that's his choice. Travis stared at her in disbelief. She was admitting to psychological manipulation and calling it motivation. How many other schools in the district use this model? I don't see how that's relevant to our discussion. Because I think there are other people being exploited the same way Ezekiel was, and I think you know exactly how many there are. Serafina stood up abruptly. Mr. Kelce, this conversation is over. If you have concerns about district policies, I suggest you contact the superintendent's office. But Travis wasn't done. Over the next 2 days, he conducted his own investigation, visiting schools throughout the district and talking to anyone who would speak with him. What he discovered was even worse than he had imagined. At Jefferson Elementary, he found 78-year-old Cornelius Weatherby working alone to maintain a building designed for 600 students. Cornelius had been told that budget cuts meant he was the only thing standing between the children and a dangerously unsanitary environment. At Washington Middle School, 71-year-old Prudence Millfield was not only cleaning the entire building, but also doing basic maintenance work. It should have been handled by licensed contractors. She had fallen off a ladder the previous month while trying to change light bulbs in the gymnasium ceiling, but hadn't reported the injury because she was afraid of being fired. At Roosevelt High School, 84-year-old Bartholomew Ashford had been working 7 days a week for 8 months without a single day off because he was told the school couldn't function without him. The pattern was identical at every school. Elderly work, desperate for income, being psychologically manipulated into accepting impossible workloads while being paid wages that barely kept them alive. But it was a conversation with Cordelia Ashworth, a third-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary, that gave Travis the final piece of the puzzle he needed. I've been teaching here for 15 years, Cordelia told him quietly. I've watched this happen gradually. 5 years ago, we had a full janitorial staff, 4 people who took pride in their work and were paid decent wages. Then the district started talking about budget cuts and efficiency improvements. What changed? They started replacing the regular janitors with these elderly workers, one school at a time. At first it seemed compassionate, giving older people a chance to stay active and earn some money. But then I started noticing how exhausted they always looked, how they worked longer and longer hours. Did you ever try to help them? Cordelia's face filled with shame. I told myself it wasn't my business. They were adults, making their own choices. But the truth is, I was afraid that if I spoke up, I might lose my job too. The district made it very clear that anyone who caused problems would be seen as not being a team player. So everyone just watched and stayed silent? We told ourselves we were protecting our own families. Teachers don't make enough money to risk unemployment. But watching Mr. Thornberry collapse in that hallway, seeing those children's faces when they found him, Cordelia started crying. I realized I had been complicit in something horrible. Travis asked the question he had been dreading. How many schools are we talking? 12 elementary school, 4 middle school, and 2 high school, all using the same model, all exploiting elderly workers who are too desperate or too proud to complain. That night, Travis made the decision that would define the rest of his involvement in this story. He wasn't going to try to work within the system anymore. He wasn't going to negotiate with administrators or file polite complaints. He was going to declare war on the entire district and everyone who had participated in or enabled this exploitation. He started by contacting every journalist he knew, providing them with recordings, documentation, and contact information for the exploited workers he had found. He hired private investigators to dig deeper into the district's finance and find out where the money saved by exploiting elderly workers was actually going. Most importantly, he began reaching out to the families and communities of the affected workers, helping them understand that what was happening to their loved ones wasn't just unfortunate, it was criminal. The first news story broke on a Thursday morning, and by Friday afternoon, scandal was national news. Video footage of Ezekiel's collapse, recorded by the school's security cameras, was broadcast on every major network. The image of an 82-year-old man literally working himself into a heart attack became a symbol of everything wrong with how America treated its elderly citizens. Serafina Coldwell found herself giving interviews on national television, trying to defend a system that looked increasingly indefensible in the harsh light of public scrutiny. These are voluntary employment arrangements, she insisted during one particularly brutal interview. No one forced these individuals to accept these positions. The interviewer wasn't having it. Ms. Coldwell, you're paying people less than $4 an hour to do work that would challenge someone half their age. How is that not exploitation? Market wages reflect the value of the work being performed. These positions are entry-level janitorial work. Entry-level? Mr. Thornberry was maintaining an entire elementary school by himself. Serafina's composure finally cracked completely. Look, we provided employment to people who couldn't find work anywhere else. We gave them purpose and dignity. If they chose to work extra hours, that was their decision. But the public wasn't buying. Within a week, protests were organized outside every school in the district. Parents were pulling their children out of classes. The teachers' union, which had remained silent for years, suddenly found their voice and began demanding investigation. Travis had succeeded in turning a local story about one exploited janitor into a national conversation about elder abuse and corporate greed. But the system wasn't going to go down without a fight. The backlash came swiftly and brutally. Within 48 hours of the story going national, Travis found himself facing a coordinated attack designed to destroy his credibility and silence his voice. The school district had hired one of the most ruthless legal firms in the country, and they were prepared to use every weapon at their disposal. The first salvo came in the form of a cease and desist letter, claiming that Travis had violated privacy laws by recording conversations without consent, and demanding that he retract all his statements or face a lawsuit that could cost him millions of dollars. Mr. Kelce, the district's lead attorney, Harrison Blackwood, said during a tense phone call, "My clients are prepared to pursue every legal remedy available to protect their reputation from your baseless accusation. This includes seeking damages for the harm your reckless statements have caused to the district's ability to serve students." Reckless statements? I have recordings of your client admitting to exploiting elderly workers. You have recordings obtained illegally that my clients will argue were taken out of context and edited to create a false narrative. In court, under oath, with proper legal representation, I think you'll find the story looks very different. But the legal threats were just the beginning. Within days, Travis began receiving anonymous phone calls threatening his family and his career. Someone leaked his personal phone number and home address online, leading to a constant stream of harassment from people who had been convinced that he was attacking hard-working school administrators for publicity. More insidiously, the district began spreading rumors designed to undermine his credibility. Suddenly, stories appeared in local media questioning his motives, suggesting that he was exploiting the situation for personal gain, and implying that his involvement was actually making things worse for the elderly workers he claimed to be helping. Barnaby Wickshire, a longtime district employee who had been complicit in the exploitation for years, suddenly emerged as a whistleblower. But his version of events painted Travis as an outsider who didn't understand the complex realities of school administration. "Mr. Kelce means well," Barnaby told reporters, "but he's created chaos in a system that was actually working for everyone involved." These elderly workers were happy with their arrangements until he stirred up trouble. The psychological pressure was enormous. Travis's own lawyers began advising him to settle quietly and walk away. "The district has unlimited resources and unlimited time," his lead attorney warned him. They can drag this out for years, and even if you eventually win, the cost will be devastating. The breaking point came when Travis received a call from Temperance Bramblewood, Ezekiel's granddaughter. She was crying so hard he could barely understand her words. "Mr. Kelce, please, you have to stop this. The people from the school came to our apartment today. They said that because of all the trouble you've caused, Grandpa might not be able to work anywhere in the district anymore. They said his medical bills aren't covered by insurance, and that if he can't work, we'll lose our apartment." Travis felt his world collapsing around him. His efforts to help had apparently made things worse for the very people he was trying to protect. The district was using Ezekiel's precarious situation as leverage against Travis, essentially holding the old man's livelihood hostage. That night, Travis sat in his hotel room, surrounded by legal documents and threatening letters, seriously considering whether he should abandon the fight. He had the resources to walk away from this, but Ezekiel and the other exploited workers didn't. If he gave up, they would be left even more vulnerable than before. It was then that he received a call from Dr. Magnolia Westbrook that changed everything. "Mr. Kelce, I need to see you immediately. I've discovered something that changes the entire nature of this case." They met at the hospital, where Dr. Westbrook led him to her office and closed the door behind them. Her expression was grave, and Travis could see that whatever she had found had shaken her deeply. "I've been reviewing medical records for elderly workers throughout the district, trying to understand the scope of the health problems we're seeing. What I found is beyond anything I could have imagined." She spread out a series of medical files on her desk. "In the past 3 years, 17 elderly workers in this district have died from what were officially classified as natural causes: heart attacks, strokes, falls. But when I looked at the circumstances surrounding these deaths, I found a pattern that suggests something much more sinister." Travis felt his blood run cold. What kind of pattern? All 17 were working in school that had recently transitioned to the single janitor model. All 17 had been working excessive hours for below minimum wages. All 17 had medical records showing signs of extreme physical stress in the months before their death. Dr. Westbrook pulled out another set of documents. "But here's the most damning evidence. I found internal emails between district administrators discussing these deaths. They knew that their employment model was literally killing, and they continued it anyway because it was saving money." She handed Travis a printed email that made him feel physically sick to read. "The recent incident at Roosevelt High was unfortunate, but not unexpected given the age demographic of our contract workers. Legal suggests we review our liability exposure, but emphasizes that these individuals are technically independent contractors, which limits our exposure. Recommend we continue current staffing model, but implement additional liability waivers." Signed by Thaddeus Grimwald. Travis stared at the email in horror. They knew people were dying. They kept doing it anyway. "It gets worse. I found evidence that they were specifically targeting elderly workers who they believed were less likely to complain or seek legal remedy. They were looking for people who were isolated, desperate, and proud, people who would suffer in silence rather than cause trouble." Dr. Westbrook pulled out one final document. This is an internal memo from Serafina Coldwell to the superintendent, dated 6 months ago. It specifically recommends expanding the program to more schools because our elderly contractors have proven to be remarkably resilient and adaptable to increasing workload demand. Travis realized that what he had discovered wasn't just exploitation. It was systematic abuse that had already killed 17 people and was designed to kill more. The district administrators weren't just greedy, they were sociopathic. "Dr. Westbrook, are you willing to testify about what you've found?" "Mr. Kelce, I took an oath to do no harm. Staying silent about this would be the greatest harm I could do. Yes, I'll testify. I'll tell the world exactly what these people have been doing." That night, Travis made his final decision. He wasn't going to settle. He wasn't going to be intimidated by legal threats or character assassination. He was going to use every resource at his disposal to destroy the people who had created this system of abuse, no matter what it cost him personally. The war was about to escalate to a level that would shock everyone involved. Travis's counterattack began at dawn on a Monday morning with a coordinated media blitz that caught the school district completely off guard. Armed with Dr. Westbrook's medical evidence, the damning internal email, and testimony from dozens of affected families, he didn't just go public. He went nuclear. The first devastating blow came when he held a press conference outside Lincoln Elementary School, surrounded by the families of the 17 elderly workers who had died under suspicious circumstances. With cameras rolling and the nation watching, Travis laid out the evidence in methodical, horrifying detail. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're dealing with here isn't just exploitation. It's systematic murder disguised as employment. These administrators knew that their policies were killing people, and they continued those policies because dead employees don't file complaints. He held up the internal emails that Dr. Westbrook had discovered. These documents show that district administrators discussed the deaths of elderly workers as acceptable casualties of their cost-saving measure. The crowd erupted in outrage as Travis read directly from the email, quote, "While the mortality rate among our senior contractors is higher than anticipated, the cost savings continue to justify the program expansion." This was written by Thaddeus Grimwald just 2 weeks after 74-year-old Martha Henderson collapsed and died while cleaning Washington Middle School alone at midnight. Travis then did something that would be replayed on news channels for weeks to come. He announced the creation of the Dignity Defense Fund, a $5 million initiative that would provide immediate financial support to every exploited worker and their family, fund legal representation for anyone who wanted to pursue criminal charges, and establish a permanent foundation to monitor workplace abuse of elderly Americans. But money isn't enough, Travis continued, his voice rising with righteous anger. We're not just going to help the victim. We're going to make sure the perpetrators face justice. Today, I'm filing criminal complaints against every administrator who participated in this scheme, charging them with elder abuse, fraud, and reckless endangerment resulting in death. The legal avalanche that followed was unprecedented. Within 24 hours, Serafina Coldwell, Thaddeus Grimwald, and 6 other district administrators were arrested on charges ranging from elder abuse to criminal conspiracy. The FBI launched a federal investigation into what they termed a systematic pattern of exploitation targeting vulnerable senior citizens. Barnaby Wickshire, faced with the prospect of criminal charges, became a cooperating witness and revealed even more damning details about the scope of the abuse. They had spreadsheets, he told investigators, actual spreadsheets calculating how much money they could save by working elderly people to death instead of hiring adequate staff. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Parents organized massive protests, demanding the resignation of the entire school board. Teachers who had remained silent for years suddenly found their voices, with many testifying about the systematic intimidation that had prevented them from speaking out earlier. Cordelia Ashworth became the face of educator resistance, tearfully testifying before a congressional committee about the culture of fear that had allowed the abuse to continue. We were told that questioning district policies meant we didn't care about children's education. We were made to feel that protecting our own jobs was somehow protecting our students. But watching Mr. Thornberry nearly die while we stayed silent taught me that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing. The investigation expanded far beyond Kansas City when other districts around the country were found to be using similar model. What had started as one man's attempt to help an exploited janitor had become a national reckoning with how America treated its most vulnerable workers. But the most important moment came when Ezekiel Thornberry, recovered enough to speak publicly, appeared at a congressional hearing to testify about his experience. Sitting in his wheelchair, still weak but determined, he delivered words that would be remembered as the defining moment of the entire scandal. For months, they convinced me that accepting abuse was the same as accepting responsibility. They made me believe that if I complained about working conditions that were killing me, I would somehow be failing the children's trying to protect. But Mr. Kelce taught me something that saved not just my life, but my soul. He taught me that there's a difference between serving others and sacrificing yourself to enable others' cruelty. Ezekiel's voice grew stronger as he continued. I thought I was being humble by accepting injustice. I thought I was being strong by suffering in silence. But real strength isn't enduring abuse. It's standing up and saying that human beings deserve dignity, regardless of their age or their desperation. The congressional hearing room was completely silent as Ezekiel delivered his final statement. To every older person watching this who thinks they should be grateful for any job, no matter how it treats them, You deserve better. Your experience has value. Your health matters. And your life is worth more than any corporation's profit margin. The systemic changes that followed were unprecedented. Congress passed the Elderly Worker Protection Act, establishing federal oversight of employment practices targeting senior citizens. The Department of Labor created a special division to investigate workplace abuse of older Americans, and dozens of states passed laws making it a felony to exploit elderly workers through psychological manipulation or below subsistence wages. Serafina Coldwell was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for elder abuse and conspiracy. Thaddeus Grimwald received 12 years for his role in orchestrating the psychological manipulation that had killed 17 people. The school district was forced to pay $50 million in settlements to affected families and to completely restructure their employment practices under federal oversight. But the most meaningful changes were personal. 6 months after the scandal broke, Travis returned to Lincoln Elementary School, now completely transformed. The building sparkled with cleanliness, maintained by a fully staffed, fairly paid janitorial team. The hallways buzzed with the energy of students learning in an environment where every adult was treated with dignity and respect. And there, in the main hallway where he had once collapsed from exhaustion and abuse, stood Ezekiel Thornberry. But he wasn't cleaning floors anymore. He was wearing a suit and carrying a clipboard, working as the school's new workplace dignity coordinator, a position created specifically to ensure that no employee would ever again be exploited or abused. When Ezekiel saw Travis approaching, his face lit up with the warm smile of a man who had reclaimed his sense of self-worth. Students walked by, greeting him respectfully as Mr. Thornberry, and he responded to each one with the patience and kindness that had made him such a beloved figure, even during his darkest days. Mr. Kelce, Ezekiel said, extending his hand with the firm grip of someone who no longer doubted his own value. Welcome back to Lincoln Elementary. As you can see, we've made some changes around. Travis looked around at the transformed school, not just the physical improvement, but the atmosphere of mutual respect and dignity that now permeated every interaction between staff, student, and administrator. It looks incredible, Ezekiel. How does it feel to be back? Ezekiel's expression grew thoughtful. You know, for the longest time, I thought strength meant enduring whatever people demanded of me. I thought love meant sacrificing myself for others, even when those others were harming. But you taught me something that changed everything. What's that? You taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to refuse to enable cruelty. You taught me that accepting injustice isn't humility, it's cowardice. And most importantly, you taught me that when good people find the courage to fight alongside each other, even the most powerful systems of abuse can be brought down. Ezekiel paused, looking directly at Travis, with eyes that now held confidence instead of desperation. I spent months thinking I was protecting children by allowing myself to be destroyed. But the truth is, I was teaching them that it's normal for powerful people to abuse vulnerable people. Now, every day, these children see adults treating each other with dignity and respect. That's the real lesson, that every human being, regardless of age or circumstances, deserves to be treated as if their life has value. As Travis prepared to leave, Ezekiel walked him to the exit, moving with the steady pace of a man who no longer carried the weight of impossible expectations on his shoulder. Thank you, Ezekiel said quietly, for reminding me that I was worth saving. And thank you for showing me that sometimes, when we find the courage to stand up for our own dignity, we end up saving a lot more people than just ourselves. Travis looked back at the school one final time, knowing that the changes that had begun with one man's collapse in a bathroom would ripple out for generations. Students who attended Lincoln Elementary would grow up seeing their elders treated with respect and dignity. They would learn that exploitation and abuse were not normal parts of adult life, but aberration that could be challenged and overcome. The janitor who had once been invisible, suffering in silence while the world looked away, had become a symbol of the truth that every person's dignity mattered, and that sometimes the most powerful act of revolution is simply refusing to accept that abuse is acceptable.